This is Glenn Hauser with World of Radio, 2278. World of Radio is a listener-supported public service program about communications around the world, above all the dynamic medium of international shortwave between the AM and FM bands. On this edition recorded January 16th, Canada, Czechia, Finland, France, India, Madagascar, Maldives, Myanmar, North America, Oklahoma, Pakistan, Romania, Switzerland, UK, USA, and the propagation outlook. Standard disclaimer. January 10th at 0727 UT, I was hearing a Canadian station on 680 kilohertz, still identifying as CJOB, that's in Winnipeg. This was on my east-west long wire, which would not favor north-south signals, rather than KKYX in Texas or KFEQ in Missouri, as I usually hear on 680. So, like so many scofflaw Canucks, CJOB must not be on legal night pattern, sending all its signal north-northeast from Winnipeg. Via Gagra Powell in Vienna, in the British DX Club, from the website of Radio Prague International, Czechia. News about their QSLs for 2025. Gorilla, flamingos, rhinos, and tigers. There's a zoo theme for the 2025 series of amateur radio QSL postcards, it says. Sticking to a tradition with a series of amateur radio postcards every year. Klara Stiskalova, editor-in-chief of Radio Prague International, says, every year we try to choose a topic that is connected with significant events in Czech history. Last year we celebrated the year of Czech music, or we try to introduce interesting places, monuments, and personalities. This year, in a summer series, we will focus on the largest Czech zoos and their unique rescue programs, which is why we've chosen the animals as the theme. Kristina Markova is behind the graphic design. Like a jigsaw puzzle, after collecting 4 animal illustrations, the image will be combined into a larger whole that depicts the biodiversity of zoos. I've had a look at the illustrations. I would say they're sort of cubist depictions of various animals, certainly not photographically accurate images. The website goes on to say, as many stations have reduced their shortwave broadcasts, they've also stopped issuing QSL cards. RPI still continues this tradition. The constant price increases by Czech Post have forced us to send printed postcards since last year only to those listeners who send us a postcard or letter themselves. We will send electronic QSL cards to those who send us a message about listening to our programs by email or via a web form. You reach this and other stuff about the station at english.radio.cz. We're already to the 6th letter in the alphabet, so it happens. The next one is about Finland, also about QSLs. Manuel Mendez in Spain says, 6185, Real Mix Radio Rasipori, received EQSL and news about the station in 12 days. The reception report was sent to realmix.sw@gmail.com. The station news, according to the new radio license, regular Real Mix radio broadcasts will be heard again in February on Saturdays and Sundays, and the entire last week of February on the frequency of 6185. During the spring, maybe if the economy allows, we will get 250 watts transmission power, which would improve signal strength. Nowadays it's 100-watt carrier. Updates and news regarding Real Mix radio broadcasts are on FB. Via Christian Guibaudot in France and the British DX Club, this news about Radio France International. From the RFI English service, World Radio Day is coming up, 13 February. As we do every year, we'll have a feast in the Sound Kitchen, filled with your voices. Send your short recorded WRD greetings to the Sound Kitchen, one word, at rfi.fr by 1 February. This year's theme is radio and climate change, but you don't have to talk about the theme. If you just want to say hello, that's fine too. Be sure to include your name and where you live in your message. There's one small problem here I must point out. RFI refuses to put any English on shortwave. You must hear it some other way. Joe Hanlon in New Jersey says, RFI has had no English shortwave broadcasts since the end of March 2020, at the start of the COVID pandemic. I recall some years ago, RFI had a short English news update that was accessible through Audio Now if you dialed a U.S. phone number. Sadly, that service is gone. They don't even specify their website in this message, but I assume you can find all about it if you hunt around at rfi.fr. Here's another report of that quarter-hour English program Spotlight from All India Radio, Akashvani, which they embed in other language broadcasts, as if to hide them. From Rob Wagner in Australia in the NASA flash sheet, 15260, the Bengaluru site at 0205 UT, January 10th. The Spotlight news segment in the Indonesian service, and back in Indonesian at 0215. He says a squealing transmitter made listening difficult, even though the signal was very strong. From Monterey, California, Ron Howard says, one of the reasons I like listening to Akashvani Kohima, medium wave 639, so much is that they have a fair amount of programming in English. It reminds me of listening to AIR Shillong on 4970 so many years ago, with nice shows in English. Both are in Northeast India. Via remote receiver, here's a clip Ron recorded January 12th from 1235 UT on 639 kHz.
So listeners, I'm ready to give you the next song because this is another beautiful classic song, I would say. You know, it is said that love often finds us when we least expect. And here we have Suzi Quatro capturing that very beautifully in her song, Stumbling In. Our love is alive, and always again.
In communication of the British CX Club, Tomoke Wagai in Wakayama, Japan, reports stations to 2 decimal places, most of them, such as Madagascar World Voice, showing their typically off frequency minus 9844.96. December 15th at 1902 with Fleetwood Mac everywhere, and 9884.93. December 19th at 1853, Clean Bandit and Demi Lovato music. Shortwave from Maldive Islands is long gone, but there's still medium wave 1449 kHz. Another interesting remote catch by Ron Howard, listening via the Bengaluru, India remote. 1449, midnight 18 UT, January 12th. Reciting from the Quran, and bird calls at midnight 28 to midnight 30, perhaps an interval signal. Time pips and Islamic segment at midnight 30 and still heard an hour later. Also later that same UT day, January 12th, English at 1300 to 1310, but too weak to copy much. Singing in vernacular at 1310, Islamic Maghrib sunset call to prayer at 1313. By the way, the official religion of the Maldives is Islam, and the Constitution requires citizens to be Muslim. Bruce Churchill in California replies, I'm now hearing Malay from the FR4RX remote site on Reunion Island, before and after midnight UT, with a woman announcer and local music. Reunion is about 3 times the distance from Bengaluru, but a noticeably better signal. Nothing beats an all-over-water path on medium wave. Unfortunately, he says, I missed out on Malay on shortwave, thanks to Navy deployments. And he adds, the bird call or rooster crowing combo is indeed the interval signal for Maldives, as it seems to be repeated in between programs, particularly at midnight 27 UT each day. I did some research and identified the bird call. It's the Asian koel, K-O-E-L. And Mauno Ritula replies, yes, here in Finland it's a rather regular visitor on 1449 kHz after Iran signs off at 1820, but mostly Saudi Arabia is stronger. At 1300 English News, I've heard only once in midwinter when Iran starts later on Fridays. Andrea Lavandel in Italy says, under good conditions, not an uncommon catch for Asia medium wave DXers in Europe, even at southern latitudes. And Antonello Napolitano, also in Italy, says, I analyzed a recording of the entire medium wave band by using Jaguar software and found it January 13th at midnight 28 with that interval signal, verses and chirps, including a kind of Indian blackbird and rooster. mixed with Saudi Arabia. And Eduard Korsakov in Moscow heard it directly, 6.5 megameters away, sometime in December. More monitoring of Myanmar, still on shortwave. Ralphus W. Perry in Illinois reports in the National Flash Sheet about 7345. Tazin Radio via Pien U Luen on January 7th, blending with and at times covering CNR7 China at 1310. Both were talking at first, but Tazin went to music at 1316, standing out much better, as Radio the Great Bay stays in a talk show. Keeping them straight is also assisted by frequent checks of the CNR7 parallel on 13770. By 1325, China dominating, but the Tazin signal very clear underneath and easy to keep separate, mainly in music. And it seems Tazin left the air at 1329, leaving CNR7 alone on the frequency. Then more monitoring on January 12th, 7345. Tazin Radio, fairly good signal over Chinese code channel at 1240. Tazin with YL in high, lilting voice reading a commentary in Burmese over muffled CNR7 at the same time with a man in Cantonese. At 1246, China goes to YL talks, while Tazin goes into sentimental orchestral music with YL singer. And CNR7 more on top by now. They seem to be alternating. As for the scheduling changes reported last week involving other Myanmar broadcasts, Joe's Jacob in India says on January 10th, 9730 signed off at 1630 with the national anthem. But on January 15th, Ron Howard reports, via remote in Thailand, 5985, Myanmar Radio after midnight 42 UT. Announcers and indigenous music. This frequency had been silent for about a week. The former 9730 at this time is now absent. Nice to have them on 5985 again, especially for the English segment at 1530. Now some North American pirates, especially when they're reported outside the regular 6.9 megahertz pirate band. But first on 6960 USB, January 12th at 0415, I was hearing a variety of siren sounds intermittently. And then a minute later, they seemed to be centered about 6955 USB instead. Apparently no one else was reporting this. And from Mark Taylor in Wisconsin in the NASA Flash Sheet, 4040 USB and NID at 0429, January 11th. 5836, Psycho Radio at 0131, January 6th. And on 5836, an NID January 11th at midnight 38. That report was from Montney in Michigan. In the Michigan ARE tip sheet, Ken Zicki says 6905 upper sideband, Brain Brothers Shortwave Pirate Radio Network, jazzy versions of Old Lang Syne and WWV, leading up to the top of our ID and fake ad for Medicare Hotline, and oldies. First ID mentioned the frequency and all 2,000 watts, and the time signal was accurate. I missed the first couple of broadcasts of this new pirate. It was a rather refreshing change, he says. This was before and after midnight UT, January 4th into 5th. From Sun City, Arizona, Rick Barton has numerous logs of the Antichrist pirate station YHWH on 7475. I'll just give the dates and times. December 28th at 0320. It suddenly cut in. January 4th at 0240. January 8th at 0345. I heard them January 10th at 0706, as they're sometimes running very late. On that occasion, Ron Howard in California was also listening from 0715, but poor everywhere I checked remote. The poorest I have ever heard him, in fact. And Rick Barton hearing them January 12th at 0250, to which Walt Somanev in BC replies, pretty crappy reception here at 0344. Only certain of his antennas could hear it at all. He says starting from perhaps a month ago, something has changed with YHWH. I used to hear him at very good levels night after night. Since then, however, he's very much hit or miss. Is it propagation? I suspect something more. I think he's operating on much lower power than before. Finally, the Japanese Shikari FM, as reported by Rick Barton, on 11530 AM, actually slightly to the lower side, December 29th at 1640. He says it was already on, but they are often heard only after 17 or 18 UT. On January 5th at 1730, it cut in at that time and was going all day, sometimes with long and deep fades. And finally, on January 7th, it finally came on at 19 UT, but just an open carrier past 1930. The Media Magazine you monitor with your mind. World of Radio 2278. A non-commercial service like our website, worldofradio.com. Our thanks this week for generous financial support from Doug Brown of London, Ontario, and Seminole, Florida, who sent a check on a U.S. bank to Glenn Hauser, P.O. Box 1684. ENID OK 73702. One may also contribute via PayPal, not necessarily in U.S. funds, to WORADIO at yahoo.com. All the way from January 9th to January 16th, that's a full week, my local X-band station in Enid, KZLS 1640, was running dead air. It was still transmitting, but no modulation whenever I checked. I always wonder if in such a situation advertisers get a rebate or no one notices anything's amiss. Not including the inefficiency factor, why in the world were they burning over 1,700 kilowatt hours of juice for nothing? Least they could have done would be continuous Morse code IDs, a worldwide week-long DX test. Perhaps by leaving the carrier on, they would not count as being off the air, according to FCC. Meanwhile, I could hear another station underneath at night, WSJP, Relevant Radio in Wisconsin. Speaking of dead air, Enid's only local TV signal, K17JND, on the 3ABN network, channel 17, on its main channel has been dead air, plenty of video, but no audio for over a month. As of January 10th, Optimum Cable in Enid and presumably everywhere has been blocking Nexstar stations because of a failure to reach agreement on costs. Here, that includes our NBC affiliate, KFOR Oklahoma City, and all its subchannels, and its full-power substation KAUT, as well as News Nation, which had been on Cable 85. Optimum already raised prices, and now it offers less. Apparently, this has something to do with MSG and sports rights, about which we don't care at all and would gladly dispense with all sports cable channels and their costs. Fortunately, KFOR on RF27 is an Oklahoma City station with a reliable direct-by-antenna reception. Pakistan is another country, no longer shortwave broadcasting, but still on medium wave, and Ron Howard's been listening to that via remote in Nepal on 585 kHz Islamabad. January 13th, before and after 16 UT, when there was news and weather in English. Now concerning DRM, in the British DX Club, Ian Brooks in Dorset says, all Romania's transmissions seem to be RRI journaling and not audio. Alan replies, I am receiving audio from RRI and other stations now using the XHE AAC codec, but reception on 11630 at 18 UT is not great. Signal often fades out after 15 minutes. Their German, French, and Italian DRM services on 7 and 5 MHz come through with excellent audio. I could not get my old version of Dream to decode the new codec, but downloaded a modified version from the drmrx.org forum. But even that did not work until by chance I downloaded a copy of the K-Lite Mega Codec Pack, and now it's working, a treat, and I'm hearing good quality audio from a number of stations in this mode. Regarding Switzerland's SBC closing down Outmoded FM, these comments from Bob Zanotti at Switzerland in Sound, Facebook. The reason for this move is questionable. First of all, it is for economic reasons, whereby agencies that broker DAB plus frequencies stand to profit from the move. Supporters also claim a greater variety of programming, which is true, but I doubt that many Swiss radio listeners will make use of the additional program offerings. Then there's the business angle. People have to buy new DAB plus capable radios. Good for business, bad for consumers. But Switzerland is not a consumer-friendly country. Here, it's all about business. What disturbs me most is that Switzerland is going this alone, as usual, just as in 2004 when shortwave, Swiss Radio International was shut down. The shutdown of FM in this country totally ignores the fact that this makes Switzerland a DAB plus broadcasting island. This is a country of transit and tourism, and not everyone in Europe is equipped to receive DAB plus, especially not all car drivers. I was told that not even the emergency FM broadcast in Swiss tunnels will be kept. This is inconsiderate and insensitive vis-a-vis the neighboring countries. Once again, Switzerland has shown itself as a bad European. FM will continue in all the neighboring countries, but not here. The EU has passed a new regulation making DAB+ in new cars mandatory after 2026, but Switzerland couldn't wait. Why not? Largely because the Minister of Communications is a member of the right-wing anti-EU and nationalistic Swiss People's Party, and the last thing on their mind is concern for the rest of Europe. In communication of the British DX Club, Alan Pennington and Mike Barraclough write, "Sadly, we have learned that Edwin Southwell passed away last July, age 78. He attended virtually every club meeting at Reading for years. He joined the club in April 1976. He was also in the World DX Club and DSWCI. Edwin's name was also heard often on radio station mailbag and DX programs, such as Voice of Vietnam's Letterbox. R.I.P. Edwin Southwell." UK and non, via Kari Kallio in Finland, John provides the latest schedule of his Jazz AM via Channel 292 Germany. Sunday 19 January 9670 at 11 to 12 UT and 17 to 18 UT. On Sunday 26 January 9670 at 12 to 13 UT, 3955 at 22 to 23. Saturday 1 February 9670 at 10 to 11 UT. Sunday 2nd February 3955 at 22 to 23 UT, and one transmission via Wolverton, UK. That is Sunday 19 January 3995 125 kilowatts at 22 to 23 GMT. Dan Robinson forwards a story from Washington Business Journal, January 10th. Congress orders sale of massive federal building steps from National Mall, the Wilbur J. Cohen Federal Building, that is, the headquarters of Voice of America and related stations. This is written by Ben Peters. Congress has directed the General Services Administration to sell the storied Wilbur J. Cohen Federal Building as part of the government's ongoing efforts to offload underutilized real estate. The Biden administration has signed off on the Thomas R. Carper Water Resources Development Act of 2024 that requires GSA to sell the 330 Independence Avenue Southwest, a crosswalk away from the National Mall, for fair market value at highest and best use, no later than 2 years following the vacancy of its last remaining federal agency. The outgoing U.S. Agency for Global Media, which oversees VOA, is believed to be the 1.2 million square foot building's only occupant, according to 2 federal real estate experts. USAGM last year signed a sesquidecade deal to relocate and downsize its offices from 698,000 square feet at the Cohen Building into 350,000 square feet at the East Bank-owned 1875 Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest. The relocation is expected to begin in the coming months and occur in phases over the next several years. Amid its search for new office space, USAGM described the facilities at Cohen as highly inefficient. They suffer from functional obsolescence. If you've been looking up FCC info at their website for AM and FM query, not anymore, says Scott Feibush in IRCA. The CDBS database on which the old AM and FM query was built is now defunct. I expect those search pages will go away soon, and the data in them is no longer current. FCCdata.org uses the now current LMS database and is a great front for that data. You can also search LMS directly by going to enterpriseefiling.fcc.gov. Besides KZLS 1640 for a week, I found another station in dead air, at least briefly, on 880, 0758 UT, January 12th, KRVN in Nebraska, but it came alive at 0800. This led Greg Hardison to reply, "We're hearing more from the radio business' latest format, dead air, apparently spread from KZLS, now featured on a major signal. KRVN with dead air, 0915 UT, January 15th, still 0926, but finally at 0929, illegal ID and some local ad spots, but at 932, back to dead air again. No dead air at WOAI 1200 San Antonio. January 12th at 0446 UT, I found a 9-second loop was being played over and over. This is the Houston Texans radio network, including 5 seconds of an ear-splitting tone. This was still going a few minutes later, and An hour later, 2 hours later, oh, how the mighty have fallen. No one minding the store at WOAI, the nation's premier clear channel station. Eric Fetters-Wulp in Washington and Walt Sullivan in BC could also perceive it through interference, still going at 0808. And Roger in Germany was hearing at least via their stream past 0915 UT. Then we have from Ike Biervert, no longer in Germany, but Birmingham, Alabama, he says, still going at 13 Zulu after my local sunrise. It just stopped. Fox about a plane crash at 1304. Dead air after the end of Fox News at 1305. After some announcements, more dead air after 1307. Greg Hardison observes that with reports that George Soros may be involved in new ownership of Audacy, AUDACY, those who prefer far-right talk shows on AM are very concerned. Almost all pirate radio busts by the FCC are on FM, not AM or shortwave. But here's one on AM, as observed by Ben Cobb. 1620 kilohertz in Boston, Massachusetts, observed on July 29th and September 11th. Confirmed by direction finding techniques from a property at 1595 to 1609 Blue Hill Avenue in Boston. Therefore, whether or not the actual pirate operator is fined, the owner of the property will be threatened with large fines. Ben Cobb also forwards news of FM pirate busts as of January 10th. That is, enforcement activities, all of these are FM. Notices of apparent liability have gone to the operators or to the landlords, several myriad dollars each. Wilfredo Ayala of La Tropica Radio, Hartford, Connecticut. James Jumpin' Jammin' Jimmy Baran, Geneva on the Lake, Ohio. Carlos Alberto Vasquez, Painesville, Ohio. Efrain Gonzalez of La Poderosa FM, Waterbury, Connecticut. Mirland La Fortune, Providence, Rhode Island. 3052 Inc. in Bronx, New York. What were the frequencies, Kenneth, not given in these headlines? The CN-NPR report, January 16th, by David Folkenflik. FCC chief dismisses complaints against TV networks. As one of her last acts before leaving office, FCC chairwoman Jessica Rosenwortzel, a Democrat, ruled against 4 petitions seeking to punish TV networks for how they cover and satirize presidential politics. She told NPR she wants to draw a clear line against ideological meddling from President-elect Trump, whose rhetorical attacks against the networks stepped up last fall. She says, "We are making very clear that this agency and its licensing authority should not be weaponized in a way that is fundamentally at odds with the First Amendment." Anne Arundel Community College is offering another radio frequency spectrum management training course. It's online only and non-credit. It begins February 3rd. For details, contact the adjunct professor, Frederick Matos, M-A-T-O-S, at 443-990-2366, or fmatos at aacc.edu. The Propagation Outlook from SWPC issued January 13th. ANK indices peaking at 10 and 3 on January 18th, 20 and 5 January 31st to February 2nd, then down to 15 and 4 on the 3rd, 12 and 4 on February 4th and 5th. Solar flux rising from 145 January 16th to a peak of only 175 January 27th and 28th, and down to 145 by February 7th. Inviting you to hear me again next week. With many thanks to all our stations and contributors, Glenn Hauser concluding World of Radio 2278 with a standard disclaimer.